signatures. In fact, it's about 183,000 as we count, following its launch on Monday to help save the pound in your pocket. And if you want to get involved, grab your phone right now and scan that QR sign right there on the screen. OK, joining me now is Charity Director of Age UK, Caroline Abrams. Thanks for joining us today, Caroline. And, of course, one of the huge concerns about a sudden jolt towards a cashless society is the effect it will have on elderly people being left behind, because quite often they don't have smartphones or, indeed, credit cards. So tell us a little bit about what you're hearing.
Well, just that. We hear quite a lot from older people who are frustrated about their inability to get cash and then find problems actually spending it, because more and more ways of buying things are going to digital by default. So, you know, it's not unusual now to go into a high street shop and see a little sign that says we don't take cash or card only. And of course, also, you know, there are bugbears for lots of people, like the switch away from the old, pound in the slot to pay for your meter, your parking meter. First of all, it became card and a bit of phone. And now it seems it's not even going to be that anymore. And it's going to move over to you're needing to have an app, which, as you say, means you've got to have a smartphone. Quite a lot of people have phones, they've got mobile phones, but they haven't necessarily got a really well-functioning, fairly modern smartphone, which you do need really to use an app.
Yeah, and Caroline, I don't know if I fit into the Age UK bracket, but I get really frustrated about car parks on coastal pathways. We've got to download an app. You can't get an internet connection. You feel like jumping off the cliff sometimes. But also a big thing in the story this week is the getting rid of train stations, ticket stations. And that's a particular interface of anxiety, isn't it, for elderly passengers trying to get around the country. If they're confronted with not being able to use cash and nobody to even talk to, it's hugely stressful for elderly people.
Yeah, I think, the fact what most older people want if they're not online is they want to talk to someone. They want to be able to make a transaction face to face. And of course, I know that's not very good for businesses because it means you've got to pay those people's wages. But all those jobs are going of people who used to interface with the public for those transactions, and expecting everyone to be able to do it online or in advance and all of that is really difficult for some people. And it isn't only older people, I think, who are worried about ticket offices. It's also, as I'm reading, cyclists, because there can be a problem taking your bike on the train. And also very much so, I think, disabled people, who I quite often see posts on social media from disabled people who have struggled to get on and off a train with a wheelchair, for example, and do need extra help. So it's partly, of course, rightly as you say, that things are going online. But the other side of the coin is that actually that means there are less people around to help you if you need some support. So it's not helpful if you're an older person to be trying to live in this kind of society, unless, of course, you are internet savvy. And there are older people who are brilliant at the internet, but most, of course, once you get to a certain age, didn't grow up with it. And if you didn't use it at work and you didn't have to come across it, then you can easily get to the age of 65, 70, 80, really on it and very careful to make sure that you're not sending money to the wrong person or things like that. And if you do, then you can end up in quite a lot of trouble. So actually, even people who are online, we're probably exaggerating the extent of their capability to use online mechanisms, some of which are very clunky still, as I'm sure you'd agree, or alternatively, to be able to do it safely. So I think what this tells us at Age UK is that we need to not stop people who want to use digital mechanisms at all. For some people, it's great, but we always need to have an alternative for people that is user-friendly and also isn't charging them anymore just because they're not online.
Caroline Abrams, Age UK, thank you for joining us today on GB News Saturday. Much appreciated. OK, well, joining me now is the co-founder of investment platform regionally, Justin Urquhart. Stuart, Justin, always a pleasure, never a chore, especially in those resplendent red braces, which I always like to comment upon.
Thank you.
For a bit of balance, what do banks and governments see as the primary advantage of moving towards a cashless society?
Well, it's the advance of technology. You go back, what happened before cash? You had bartering. You go from bartering to cash. Cash, you then actually find better ways of managing it. Cash is a relatively inefficient way of trying to do it. That's why they charge people for when shops have to go and deliver a whole lot of coins and notes and things like that. It's messy, it's dirty, so therefore it's got extra expense. then you have to have a mint, you have to have a central bank which issues the stuff, then someone changes the royal family, you have to change the picture. All various things like that. So, it's got a great advantage to it, but it's the technology that really pushes it through, makes it cheaper and easier to use.
A lot of people have reservations. Of course, cash is easier to trace. It's harder to trace and it's harder to tax. And so people are feeling that this is statewide interference. And moreover, is this a move towards a kind of social currency, a sort of social credit system, the kind of thing we see about in China, where the government knows what you spend your money on, they know where you are, and there are very, very real concerns that could be monitored or even impacted upon?
Well, this is certainly happening now in China. I've seen experience directly of this, whereby people's behaviour with their money is being recorded on their cards, and depending on how well you've behaved or not, will entitle you to give you the ability to travel on a train. If you hadn't done that, they will withdraw your ability to actually travel. This is real central control by government. So that's the extreme. But it's not just extreme theory, it's actually practice. So, yes, people are quite right to be concerned over that. I go to the other side of it. I have my local dry cleaners. They don't take any cards at all. I said, well, why not? Surely you've got to handle all this cash. It's dirty. It's going to cost you more. So because we have had too many cards which have been stolen or got breaks on them and things like that, which we haven't been able to track down. And by the time we find out about it, the person's gone. So, there needs quite right that people should be suitably circumspect. And people also dealing with technology, you talk about people getting older with this and not being able to deal with it. Of course, you're told that actually now all your phones are intuitive. Took me a while to work out that intuitive means there are no instructions. And I look at my phone sometimes and I sit there rather blankly and I have to try and remember actually how it all works. So hopefully I'm not too stupid, but I can quite understand people of a generation. And as a good example of this, go back to the 60s when you saw people move into decimalisation from the days when we had 12 pence to the shilling, 240 of those to the pound. And it was actually very, very complicated indeed. So decimalisation was great. But for the people who were actually used to the previous mechanism, that was a whole new language for them, and they were really very confused indeed and were terrified of actually losing out.
Is the nudge towards a cashless society a precursor to a sort of central digital currency? So sterling is a thing of the past, and instead you're getting kind of crypto pounds from the government. Is this just part of a continuity, and will we look back on cash in the same way that we now look back on bartering at some point in the future?
Well, the answer is you'll still have both, but different elements. Crypto will still be there, but a crypto, I'd probably get away from calling it that and actually using blockchain to control currency. I can quite understand why the Bank of England actually in due course will have a blockchain currency. Why? Because it'll be able to issue debt in that currency and know precisely who owns it at any one time. Remember, all blockchain is a big cobweb, and in that cobweb you know exactly any transactions that happen, everyone else knows about it. So the government will know precisely is someone actually trying to money launder or cheat our government debt. So it's good control for them. But that's of no use to you if you're just trying to buy some booze around the corner. That you want alternatives to that. Plus the fact there were some really good local initiatives a few years back. We had the Bristol Pound. And they introduced a local currency with a picture, presumably, of some luminary in Bristol, presumably not involved in slavery. And the idea was to create a local currency to help with marketing Bristol, because you actually have to spend it in the Bristol area. So that's a relatively minor element. But an awful lot of people still, they trust their currency, they've got coins in their hand. And you mentioned about things like parking and things like that. I, too, find trouble sitting there saying, I've now got to use my phone for parking, but I can't get reception. So I'm stuck.
I think you're making a great case there, Justin, for why people still think cash is king. It's overwhelming. In fact, it makes me want to go and get some cheap price booze. Thanks for joining us